imagine, right, just dedicating your entire life to learning how to save people. You spend, I don't know, years in medical school. You swear this oath to do no harm. And then you step into a hospital or a clinic with a really clear foundational mission.
Right, to protect the patient.
Exactly. Protect the patient. But what happens when the greatest threat to your patient isn't actually a disease, but it's the very medical institution you work for?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what happens when you try to stand in front of that giant machine to stop it, only to find out that human laws are literally structurally designed to crush you for speaking up?
It forces a complete paradigm shift, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because when the institutions that are tasked with, safeguarding health become the primary drivers of harm, and when the legal systems designed to protect whistleblowers are just totally weaponized against them, the individual is left completely exposed.
Completely. Which brings us to the core narrative of today's deep dive. We are looking at this incredibly unique stack of sources today for you, the learner.
Yeah, it's a wild mix.
It really is.
Yeah.
We're pulling from medical tribunal documents, philosophical texts from ancient India, blueprints for modern AI healthcare systems, and like the personal account of a doctor who actually lived through this exact nightmare.
Dr. Srivatsa.
Right. This is the story of Dr. Kadali Srivatsa, who was a pediatrician and a general practitioner in the UK's National Health Service, the NHS.
Right.
He recognized these deeply dangerous practices happening in clinics. He blew the whistle, and he basically lost everything. I mean, his career, his finances, his reputation, all of it systematically dismantled just because he tried to uphold his medical oath.
And, the trajectory of his response is what makes this material so compelling for us to look at.
Oh, absolutely.
Because after being bankrupted and just flat out denied a full trial, he didn't just walk away.
Right. He didn't just give up.
No, he started looking way beyond human jurisprudence. He turned to the ancient Mimamsa Sutra and these universal laws to understand, how the cosmos itself reacts to systemic wrongdoing.
Which sounds crazy at first, but
he essentially mapped the rise of the terrifying post-antibiotic era to a failure of cosmic law. And then he used that specific understanding to engineer a technological solution.
Dr. Maya GPT.
Exactly, Dr. Maya GPT, to fight back against the whole thing.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we are going to bridge the gap here between the sterile, fluorescent halls of modern healthcare and the ancient, vibrating laws of the universe.
Yeah, but before we dive into the actual mechanics of his story, we really need to establish a very clear baseline here.
Definitely.
Because the sources we are working from today contain some intense, explicit critiques of the UK government, the National Health Service, pharmaceutical companies, and global public health policies in general.
Right, including some highly controversial stances on, vaccines and medical mandates.
Exactly. So our role today is strictly analytical. I just want to make that super clear to you listening. We are unpacking the arguments, the legal battles, and the philosophies presented in these texts.
We aren't endorsing these viewpoints.
Right, we're not taking political sides here. We're simply mapping out the narrative and the ideas contained within the original source material so you can understand the architecture of this specific worldview.
Perfect. So we are your guides through the material, analyzing the mechanics of his argument. Let's start with the root of Dr. Srivatsa's concern, which is the modern healthcare machine and the erosion of ethics.
Yeah, it starts there.
The documents paint a picture of this massive cultural shift in medicine over the last few decades. The fundamental relationship has just entirely changed.
How so?
Well, a person walking into a clinic is no longer treated as a patient. They are treated as a client.
Ah, right.
Medicine has been completely commodified.
Yeah, and the texts actually trace this shift back to the extreme individualization of modern consumer society.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, we've built an economy entirely around the idea that the consumer's immediate desire is the ultimate priority, right? The customer is always right. But when that consumer mentality bleeds into healthcare, the focus shifts away from, long-term clinical outcomes and heavily onto customer satisfaction metrics.
Wow, yeah.
So the hospital or the clinic starts operating basically like a service industry business. Profit-making, efficiency, keeping the quote-unquote client happy, those become the dominant drivers of care.
But if medicine is functioning like a consumer business where the client is always right, that creates an immediate terrifying paradox.
It really does.
Because think about it like a drive-through restaurant. If the client demands a hamburger that will literally kill them, what do? Or in this case, what happens when the client demands something that is objectively harmful to them?
Right, like if someone walks into a clinic with a viral cold.
Exactly. Which we know, science knows, does not respond to antibiotics at all.
Not even a little bit.
But they demand a Z-Pack because they want a quick fix. Treating them like a client means giving them what they want, right?
Which brings us directly to the ethical crisis at the heart of these sources. To understand why this consumer model is so incredibly dangerous, we have to look at the foundational pillars of medical ethics that Dr. Srivatsa was trying to defend in the first place.
Okay, what are those pillars?
The two most prominent are beneficence, which is the obligation to do good, and non-maleficence, which is the obligation to do no harm. You often hear it recognized by the Latin phrase primum non nocere.
First, do no harm. I mean, that seems straightforward enough, right?
In theory, yes. But medical intervention is inherently complex, and it almost always carries some kind of risk. Sometimes an action intended to do good carries a highly foreseeable risk of harm.
Okay, so how do they navigate that ethically?
The texts bring in the rule of double effect, which is a concept that's actually traced back to philosophers like Thomas Aquinas.
Oh, going way back.
Yeah. The rule basically argues that an action with both good and bad consequences is ethically permissible if the action itself is morally good or neutral, if the intention is to achieve the good effect, and if the good effect is proportionate to the bad effect.
Right. Okay, I get that. Like administering a highly aggressive chemotherapy.
That's a perfect example.
Right, because the intended good is eradicating the cancer. But the foreseeable bad effect is, well, severe nausea, hair loss, and totally suppressing their immune system.
Exactly.
But the intention is healing, and the potential good of saving their life obviously outweighs the harm.
Exactly. But now contrast that with the client model we were just talking about.
Yeah.
A patient with a viral infection demands an antibiotic.
Right.
The doctor knows for a fact it won't cure the virus. So the primary intention of prescribing the drug is no longer clinical healing.
It's just customer service at that point.
Right. It is appeasing the demanding consumer to avoid a bad review or a complaint, or literally just to move them out of the waiting room faster to hit their administrative efficiency targets.
Right.
So the intended good is administrative or financial, while the foreseeable harm is strictly biological. It's contributing to antibiotic resistance and altering the patient's microbiome.
Man, and the sources actually apply Kant's categorical imperative to this exact scenario, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, Immanuel Kant.
Right, the philosopher who argued that you should only act according to a maxim that you would wish to become a universal law.
And if we run the client model through Kant's framework, the structural flaw becomes painfully obvious.
How so?
Because if every single practitioner prescribed antibiotics or opioids purely to appease demanding patients, the entire system of pharmacology and public health would just collapse.
It'd be a disaster.
Total disaster. Therefore, prescribing a drug merely for customer satisfaction fundamentally violates ethical law. It literally cannot be universalized without causing systemic destruction.
And the sources provide the data showing that this systemic destruction is actually already happening right now. We are currently staring down the post-antibiotic era.
Yeah, we are.
Because practitioners are pushed to treat patients as clients, and because they're forced to use these rigid defensive algorithms to process people quickly, antibiotics are being overprescribed at a staggering rate.
The statistics cited in the material are they're alarming. During recent global health crises, it was observed that over 95% of patients presenting with COVID-19 symptoms were prescribed antibiotics.
Wait, really 95%? But COVID is a viral pathogen.
Exactly. It's a massive systemic violation of primum non nocere. It fuels a secondary pandemic of antimicrobial resistance.
Oh, man.
The texts warn that the proliferation of superbugs like MRSA could result in 10 million deaths annually by the year 2050.
10 million people a year dying from infections that used to be easily treatable, all because the medical system decided to prioritize customer service over actual clinical science.
Yeah.
But, if this catastrophic outcome is so visible to doctors like Srivatsa, why do the massive regulatory bodies, the agencies specifically created and funded to stop this kind of public health disaster, why do they allow it to continue?
Well, the literature provides a very specific mechanical explanation for this failure. It's a concept called regulatory capture.
Regulatory capture.
Right. It's an economic and political concept where regulatory agencies, which are created to act in the public interest, end up being totally dominated by the commercial interests of the very industries they are tasked with regulating.
And the sources lean heavily on the Vioxx scandal to illustrate how this works in practice, right?
Vioxx is basically the textbook example. It was a painkiller marketed heavily for arthritis and acute pain.
Right. I remember those commercials.
Yeah, they were everywhere. But the texts note that before it was finally pulled from the market, an estimated 88,000 to 140,000 people in the United States suffered heart attacks or strokes linked directly to the drug.
That is an insane number of people.
Resulting in tens of thousands of deaths. And the crazy part is, the signs of cardiovascular risk were there in the data, but the regulatory bodies just fail to act swiftly.
So how does that happen?
The sources break down the three primary mechanisms of regulatory capture that allow something like Vioxx to slip through.
Okay, let's dissect those mechanisms, starting with the most direct one, the revolving door.
Yeah. The revolving door is the physical movement of personnel between the regulatory agencies and the industries they regulate.
Like switching teams.
Exactly. Imagine you're a high-level regulator working for a government health agency. You know that your most lucrative future career path is to eventually become an executive or a consultant for a massive pharmaceutical company.
Right.
So consciously or subconsciously, that impacts how aggressively you police those companies. I mean, you are far less likely to drop the hammer on a corporation if you are actively hoping they will hire you for a 7-figure salary in 3 years.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Then there is information overload, which is really about the sheer asymmetry of resources.
It's David versus Goliath, really. A pharmaceutical company has thousands of scientists, lawyers, and statisticians whose sole job is to prepare and frame data for drug approval.
While the regulatory agency is
Often totally underfunded and understaffed. So the industry just floods the regulator with massive, highly complex data sets.
like burying them in paperwork.
Exactly.
Wow.
It becomes mechanically impossible for the regulators to independently scrutinize every single data point. They eventually just end up relying on the summaries and the framing provided by the industry itself.
Wow. Okay, the third mechanism is the one that really gets under the skin, I think, because it doesn't require any explicit corruption at all. Cultural capture.
Cultural capture is super insidious because the people involved genuinely believe they are doing the right thing.
Right.
Regulators and pharmaceutical executives share the same social networks. They attend the same elite universities, they present at the exact same conferences, and they operate within the exact same scientific paradigms.
You know, it makes me think of an analogy. Imagine a referee who goes out to dinner with the coaching staff of one specific team every single night.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. The referee isn't taking bribes. They aren't explicitly cheating. But over time, they just start to see the game through the eyes of that specific coaching staff. They internalize that team's worldview.
Yeah, naturally.
So when a really close call happens on the field, the referee's instinct naturally leans toward the team they understand and socialize with.
Right.
In healthcare, the regulator internalizes the industry's worldview, genuinely believing that what benefits the pharmaceutical company is ultimately what benefits public health.
So you end up with a perfectly misaligned system. The client demands immediate fixes. The pharmaceutical industry profits immensely from supplying those fixes. And the regulatory bodies are structurally, culturally, and financially incentivized to facilitate that exchange rather than block it.
Which brings us right back to Dr. Srivatsa, because he is working inside this very machine.
Exactly.
In the early 2000s, he was involved in this pilot program in the UK, training and assessing nurse prescribers. And the administrative goal of this program was purely efficiency and cost saving.
Right, trying to save money.
Right. Having nurses take on the diagnostic and prescribing roles that were traditionally held by doctors.
And the texts are highly critical of this practice when it involves practitioners operating without equivalent foundational medical training. They actually categorize it as quackery.
Dr. Srivatsa observed that these nurses were being put in an impossible position.
Huh.
I mean, they were asked to diagnose complex human beings using these static pre-printed algorithms.
Yeah.
And because they didn't have the deep holistic medical training of a physician, they engaged in what is called safety netting.
Which is, safety netting in this context is essentially defensive medicine.
How does that work?
So if an algorithm says a patient has a fever and a cough, but it lacks the nuance to differentiate between a mild viral infection and an early pneumonia, the practitioner will just overtest and overprescribe antibiotics.
That's to be safe.
Just to cover their bases and avoid any potential legal liability. Dr. Srivatsa foresaw that this specific practice was going to lead to massive misdiagnoses and contribute heavily to the antibiotic abuse crisis. He saw the danger to the patient, and he did what he was supposed to do. He spoke up.
He assumed the system would course correct.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah. But here's where it gets really interesting. Instead of fixing the problem, the system turned its weaponry entirely on him.
Yeah, it got ugly fast.
The legal documents and personal accounts in the sources outline a coordinated effort by the Surrey Primary Care Trust and ultimately the Secretary of State for Health to just crush his dissent.
The retaliation was incredibly severe and totally bureaucratic. They subjected him to a forced 2P transfer.
Wait, what is 2P?
2PE stands for Transfer of Undertakings, Protection of Employment.
Okay.
In theory, it's a regulation designed to protect employees when a business changes ownership. But the sources detail how it was actually weaponized against him.
How does an employment protection law become a weapon?
By using it to forcefully transfer him out of his stable, established role and pushing him into an untenable employment situation entirely against his will.
Wow.
It effectively destabilized his career and cut him off from his patient base. And by 2010, the retaliation culminated in his total removal from the performers group list.
The performers list, we should clarify, that is the absolute lifeline for a doctor in the UK.
It is everything.
Right. If you are not on that list, you cannot legally perform NHS primary care services.
No.
Removing him from that list didn't just fire him, it effectively ended his ability to practice his profession. It was total career annihilation.
And he attempted to fight this through human law. He filed a case against the Secretary of State.
As he should.
But the sources describe this absolutely grueling war of attrition. The opposing solicitors used their essentially infinite public resources to drag the case out through endless technical arguments, just totally draining his personal finances.
Just bleeding him dry.
Exactly. He was bankrupted before the case could ever even reach a full trial. The evidence of the danger to patient safety was never actually heard in open court.
But wait, aren't there laws explicitly designed to prevent exactly this from happening?
You would hope so.
What about whistleblower protections? I thought it was strictly illegal to fire someone for reporting a safety hazard.
Well, the existence of a law does not guarantee its application.
Right.
The texts provide this chilling reality check regarding the Public Interest Disclosure Act of 1998, which was the law supposed to protect UK whistleblowers.
Okay, what does the data say?
The statistical reality cited in the sources is that 97% of whistleblowers fail to win their cases in employment tribunals.
Wait, 97%?
Yeah.
A 97% failure rate means the law is functionally dead. It doesn't exist.
It means the institutions have learned exactly how to bypass the legislation. The documents detail the involvement of entities like NHS Resolution.
What is that?
This is an arm's-length quango of the Department of Health.
We should probably clarify what that means for our listeners outside the UK. A quango is a quasi-autonomous, non-governmental organization.
Yeah, right.
It's funded by the government, given power by the government, but operates at an arm's-length distance, meaning ministers can basically claim they aren't directly controlling its day-to-day actions.
Exactly. And NHS Resolution's stated purpose includes handling negligence claims, but the sources argue it effectively operates to help hospital trusts build impregnable legal cases against dissenting doctors.
Ah, I see.
They know they cannot explicitly fire a doctor for whistleblowing that would trigger the protections of the 1998 Act.
Right, that would be illegal.
So they change the narrative entirely. They utilize a nebulous legal categorization called SOSR.
SOSR?
It stands for some other substantial reason.
Oh, wow. So they invent a completely different reason to fire you. They bypass the whistleblowing entirely.
Precisely. They claim a quote-unquote breakdown in working relationships. They might solicit complaints from staff to build a case of alleged bullying, or claim the doctor is not a team player and is causing institutional disruption.
And then what?
Then they use the machinery of human resources and infinite legal budgets to litigate the doctor on these manufactured interpersonal grounds.
Right.
By the time the doctor is bankrupted and dismissed, the original safety concern they raised has been completely buried under a mountain of bureaucratic character assassination.
And the sources show this is a systemic playbook. It's not just an isolated incident with Dr. Srivatsa. They bring in other high-profile cases to prove the pattern.
Yeah. Dr. Raj Mathu is a prime example cited in the texts.
What happened to him?
He was a highly respected cardiologist who raised concerns about overcrowding and patient safety in a hospital in Coventry. The system suspended him for 8 years.
8 years.
And the sources indicate the NHS spent an estimated £6 million of taxpayer money on private investigators and legal fees to completely ruin his reputation with a barrage of false allegations.
£6 million just to silence one doctor. That is horrifying.
There's also the case of Dr. Chris Day, who raised alarms about dangerously understaffed intensive care units.
And they went after him, too.
In response, he had his national training number stripped.
Oh, wow.
A training number is the mandatory credential required to progress to the level of consultant in the UK. Stripping it is a targeted strike at a doctor's future earning potential and their entire career progression.
Just ruthless.
And perhaps most tragically, the texts point to the Mid-Staffordshire hospital scandal.
Yeah, Mid-Staffs is one of the darkest chapters in NHS history. Patients were left in soiled bedding. Some were so dehydrated they were literally drinking water out of flower vases. Hundreds of patients died unnecessarily.
And the formal inquiry into Mid-Staffordshire explicitly identified the aggressive silencing and abuse of whistleblowers as a primary cause of the disaster.
That makes perfect sense.
Nurses and doctors who tried to speak up about the horrific conditions were bullied into silence by management, who were obsessed with hitting financial and efficiency targets. The suppression of truth directly resulted in mass casualties.
So you step into Dr. Srivatsa's shoes for a second. You tried to warn them about the algorithms, the safety netting, the impending waves of antibiotic resistance. You did what the ethics demanded.
Yep.
And your reward is bankruptcy, exile to Germany, severe PTSD, and a legal system that straight up refuses to even look at your evidence because the opposing side outspent you.
It's devastating.
Where do you possibly go to find justice when the human courts are fundamentally captured like that?
Well, you have to look outside the human architecture. According to his writings, the total failure of the employment tribunals forced him to question the very nature of law itself.
How so?
If man-made law is merely a tool used by the powerful to protect their own interests, he realized there must be a higher, incorruptible framework.
All right.
He turned to ancient Indian philosophy, angling his worldview in the concept of dharma.
We hear the word dharma used a lot in casual conversation, often incorrectly. How do the sources actually define it in this specific legal context?
The term derives from the Sanskrit root dhr, which means to uphold, support, nurture, and sustain.
Okay.
While it is often loosely translated as religion or duty, in this context, it represents the underlying order of nature and human existence. It is the cosmic equivalent of natural law.
The distinction between modern human law and dharma is really crucial here. Human law, especially in these employment tribunals we've been talking about, is highly transactional.
Very much so.
It focuses entirely on the technical bead and the observable result. Did you breach the contract? Did the committee follow the procedural rules to fire you? It doesn't care about truth at all. It only cares about process.
Exactly. Dharma, conversely, encompasses the holistic ecosystem of the action. It evaluates the morality, the ethics, and critically, the intention behind the deed.
I think of it kind of like a traffic intersection.
Okay, let's hear it.
Human law is a red light camera. Its only function is purely binary. Did your vehicle cross the white line while the light was red? If yes, it issues a penalty.
Right.
It is a totally blind mechanism. It doesn't care if you ran the red light because your brakes failed, or because you're rushing a dying child to the emergency room, or even if the light itself was malfunctioning. It just captures the breach of process.
That's a great analogy.
But dharma is the entire ecosystem of the road. It observes why you are driving, your state of mind, your regard for the pedestrians, and even how the exhaust from your vehicle interacts with the trees lining the street. It evaluates the structural integrity of your actions against the balance of the whole.
Yes, and that holistic evaluation is the core of ancient Indian jurisprudence. Dr. Srivatsa didn't just adopt dharma as some vague spiritual comfort. He sought out the actual structural logic of it.
He went deep into it.
He turned to the Mimamsa Sutras, which were compiled by Rishi Jaimini over 2,500 years ago.
The sources outline that these sutras contain 2,668 aphorisms. And what really stands out is that this isn't just mystical poetry. This is hard logic.
It really is. It is the foundational science of adjudication.
Right.
In ancient India, the boundaries between philosophy, religion, and law were not rigidly separated like they are today. The Mimamsa Sutras dictate a rigorous scientific process of investigation.
How does it work?
They lay out a methodology, present a proposition, systematically record every single possible objection or counter-argument to that proposition, analyze the conflict, and arrive at a reasoned, unassailable conclusion.
It's basically the scientific method for law.
Exactly. It is a blueprint for discovering the truth, not just winning an argument like in a modern tribunal.
And there is a specific historical detail in these texts that creates a really stark contrast with his battle against the UK government. In ancient India, the king was not above dharma.
Which is huge. This is a radical departure from the Western legal tradition of sovereign immunity, where, quote, the king can do no wrong, and the state is largely immune from civil liability.
The state protects itself.
But in the ancient framework, the king, who is the equivalent of the modern Secretary of State, was entirely subject to the law.
Wow.
If a judge delivered a corrupt or mathematically incorrect verdict, the judge was personally fined.
I love that.
If the legal system failed to protect the vulnerable, the king himself was held responsible. He had to perform public penance or pay fines to the Brahmins. The power of the state was totally subordinate to the cosmic order.
The texts introduce two really vivid Sanskrit concepts to explain what happens when this order collapses, Matsyanya and Danda.
Yeah, Matsyanya translates to the law of the fishes.
The law of the fishes.
Right. It describes the chaotic, natural state of a pond where the big fish indiscriminately eat the small fish. It is pure, unregulated survival of the fittest.
So total chaos.
Right. It represents a society completely devoid of justice, where the strong prey upon the vulnerable without consequence. To prevent a society from devolving into the law of the fishes, it requires Danda.
Which translates literally to the rod or punishment, right?
Yes. Danda is the application of discipline. It's the force required to maintain societal order, protect the weak, and actually enforce dharma.
So, synthesizing this with Dr. Srivatsa's reality, when the bureaucratic machinery prioritized financial targets over patient safety, when they allowed untrained practitioners to use algorithms that put the public at massive risk, and when they utilized unlimited taxpayer money to crush the doctor who tried to stop it, the state was actively practicing Matsyanya.
The big fish eating the small fish.
Exactly. And the human courts, the tribunals captured by NHS resolution and SOSR, they completely refused to apply Danda. They refused to punish the perpetrators.
And the philosophical framework of the sources argues that when human institutions fail so completely to apply Danda, a massive vacuum is created.
And the universe abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. A higher order must step in to balance the scales.
Which transitions us from ancient philosophy into the actual mechanics of the cosmos. The sources explore the 12 universal laws. And, these aren't legislation passed by a parliament. They are the hidden code of existence.
Right.
They are the physical and moral mechanics of how reality reacts to wrongdoing.
And the foundational principle here is the law of divine oneness. This law posits that everything in existence is interconnected, vibrating with the same fundamental energy.
Like we're all connected.
Yeah, we are not isolated actors on a stage. The texts argue we are fundamentally linked.
Bringing this back to the hospital floor. If a medical system adopts the client model and prioritizes profit over primum non nocere, any harm inflicted upon a patient isn't just an isolated statistical error.
No, not at all.
A misdiagnosed infection or a carelessly prescribed antibiotic is a hurt inflicted upon the entire interconnected web. The golden rule, treat others as you wish to be treated, ceases to be a mere moral suggestion and actually becomes a structural fact of physics.
Right. You cannot poison the well without eventually drinking from it.
This flows directly into the law of vibration and the law of relativity. Everything is in constant motion, and our thoughts, our intentions, and the systemic goals of our institutions generate specific frequencies.
Yeah.
A healthcare system vibrating with the intention of defensive medicine and financial efficiency creates a fundamentally different reality than one vibrating with the intention of true holistic healing.
But let's look at this skeptically for a moment, because it's easy to dismiss this as just New Age comfort.
Sure.
If the universe is just vibrating energy, why would it care about a rigged employment tribunal in the UK? Does the cosmos really notice a breach of medical ethics?
That's a fair question.
The crucial point the sources make is that the universe does not, quote-unquote, care in the human emotional sense.
Right. It's not sitting there feeling sad for you.
Exactly. It doesn't feel pity for the whistleblower or anger at the corrupt bureaucrat. It operates on pure, emotionless, infallible mechanics. This is where the law of cause and effect, which is commonly understood as karma, activates.
It's Newton's third law applied to morality. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.
Exactly. You push against a wall, the wall pushes back with equal force. The sources argue this physical law extends perfectly to moral and systemic actions. Systemic wrongdoing must generate an equal and opposite reaction.
So the universe corrects itself.
The universe is a self-correcting mechanism. The texts actually point to empirical research to validate this, citing a 2005 study by Dr. Stephen G. Post, published in the International Journal of Behavioral Medicine.
Oh, I saw that. What did it say?
The study examined altruism, and it provided data showing that our actions, both positive and negative, create measurable biological and societal ripples. True altruism improves the health of the giver and the receiver, while systemic selfishness generates measurable decay.
Which brings us to the most profound and honestly terrifying synthesis in this entire deep dive: the infallible justice of nature.
That's heavy.
The universe punishes those who break the laws that govern life on Earth. When the medical system abandoned its dharma, when it embraced the client model to maximize throughput, when it silenced the whistleblowers to protect its liability, the universe reacted.
And that reaction is biological. The texts argue that the post-antibiotic era, the rise of unstoppable superbugs, the spread of MRSA, the projection of 10 million deaths annually, is not just an accident of nature.
It's not just bad luck.
No. Through the lens of these universal laws, antimicrobial resistance is the direct, emotionless cosmic danda.
Wow.
It is the universe's punishment for a healthcare system that prioritized profit and defensive algorithms over genuine, patient-centered care.
That is just a staggering realization. I mean, the very mechanism the hospitals use to protect themselves from legal liability, the safety netting and overprescribing of antibiotics, is the exact mechanism the universe is using to bring the entire system to its knees.
It is the ultimate manifestation of cause and effect. The human courts failed to stop the harm, so biology stepped in to enforce the balance.
So what does this all mean? Dr. Srivatsa is in Germany. He's bankrupt. He has severe PTSD from the systemic abuse. And he is sitting there watching the exact biological catastrophe he warned about slowly materializing.
Yeah.
The human system is broken. The cosmic laws are exacting their toll. What is the path forward?
Well, he realized that fighting a captured human system on its own turf was a futile expenditure of energy. He needed to align his actions with the universal laws.
Okay, how?
If the system was generating harm, he needed to engineer a mechanism that generated an equal and opposite force of healing. He integrated his deep medical knowledge with modern technology to create a solution that bypasses the captured institutions entirely.
The birth of Dr. Maya GPT and the Prima kiosk.
Exactly. To appreciate the innovation of Maya, we have to look closely at the architecture of the problem it solves. Remember the nurses using those static algorithms.
Right.
Those protocols are rigid defensive checklists.
Let's break down how those static algorithms actually work mechanically, just so we're clear.
Yeah.
A patient comes in with a fever and a cough. The pre-printed algorithm says, if temperature is above 101 and cough is present for 3 days, prescribe amoxicillin. It's a simple binary if X, then Y flowchart.
And crucially, that flowchart is often designed by a hospital's legal department just as much as its medical department.
Of course.
It completely lacks human context. It strips away the nuance of clinical observation. It doesn't ask about the nature of the cough, the patient's specific environment, or the subtleties of their presentation. It just forces the practitioner into safety netting.
Right. Dr. Srivatsa recognized that to break this cycle, he couldn't just build a better checklist. He engineered Maya with a color-coded symptom combination system. It categorizes symptoms across a spectrum: very serious, moderately serious, and mild.
But the integration with large language models like ChatGPT is what fundamentally changes the paradigm here. Maya doesn't operate like a static flowchart.
But wait, isn't an AI just another algorithm? How does an LLM mechanically avoid the safety netting trap?
That's the brilliance of it. An LLM has the capacity to weigh combinations, severities, and contextual patterns dynamically.
Oh, I see.
When a patient inputs their symptoms, Maya doesn't just trigger an automatic prescription. It cross-references the specific combination of symptoms against a vast matrix of medical knowledge, essentially mimicking the diagnostic intuition and pattern recognition of a deeply experienced physician.
That's incredible.
It can actually differentiate between a viral presentation that just requires rest and a bacterial presentation that genuinely requires an intervention.
It reintroduces the nuance that the client model completely stripped away. The goal isn't processing the patient as fast as possible anymore. The goal is actual accuracy. Maya empowers the patient to co-manage their own health.
Yes. It effectively acts as a buffer against panic. When a parent has a sick child at 2 a.m., the natural instinct driven by fear is to rush straight to the emergency room.
Totally. And when you rush to the emergency room with a viral cold, 2 terrible things happen.
Yep.
1, the overworked staff utilizes safety netting and gives you an unnecessary antibiotic.
Right.
2, you are sitting in a waiting room literally exposed to hospital-acquired infections.
Yeah.
You walk in with a harmless cold, and you walk out with MRSA.
Exactly. And Maya intervenes in that specific moment of fear. It analyzes the symptoms and provides an impartial, evidence-based evaluation.
Giving them peace of mind.
It tells the patient, based on these parameters, it is safe to stay home, hydrate, and manage these symptoms. You do not need to go to the hospital tonight. And it also tells them exactly which red flags would necessitate emergency care.
By simply preventing those unnecessary hospital visits, Maya chokes off the two primary drivers of the post-antibiotic era: the rampant abuse of unnecessary prescriptions and the transmission of nosocomial superbugs.
It is a technological intervention perfectly aligned with the law of divine oneness. It empowers the individual with accurate, unbiased knowledge, removing the fear and the profit motive from the diagnostic moment. And by protecting the individual from unnecessary medical intervention, it simultaneously protects the broader community from the proliferation of resistant bacteria. It restores the balance.
It is literally the manifestation of Dharma in code.
Beautifully put.
Well, we have traversed an incredible landscape today.
Hmm?
We started with a doctor who witnessed a medical system abandoning its sacred oath to chase efficiency and consumer satisfaction.
I really covered a lot.
We saw how the mechanisms of regulatory capture, the revolving doors, and cultural biases blinded the overseers to the impending danger. We documented how the legal system, through bureaucratic weapons like SOSR and NHS resolution, crushed the whistleblower who tried to stop the harm.
Yeah.
But when human laws failed, the perspective shifted to the ancient wisdom of Rishi Jamini in the Mamasa Sutras. We explored how the universe enforces its own infallible justice, how the rise of superbugs is the emotionless consequence of systemic wrongdoing. And finally, we saw how one doctor channeled that cosmic understanding into a technological revolution, creating an AI designed to bypass the broken institutions and empower humanity to heal itself before the post-antibiotic era completely consumes us.
It is a profound arc, from systemic betrayal to innovative redemption.
Definitely.
But as we look at the reality of our current medical landscape, this material leaves us with a lingering, vital question.
What's that?
If the universe enforces its laws through perfect, emotionless cause and effect, are our modern technological quote-unquote fixes actually addressing the root problem?
Oh, wow.
When we scramble to invent ever stronger antibiotics to fight superbugs, or when we create more rigid defensive algorithms to avoid lawsuits, are we just generating larger cosmic debts? What if true healing requires us to stop fighting the biological symptoms of our broken systems and start structurally aligning our institutions with the holistic vibrational laws of the universe itself?
Man, that is a question that requires deep reflection. Thank you, the learner, for joining us on this exploration today. We encourage you to keep questioning the architecture of the systems around you and look closely at the intentions driving the institutions you rely on. The next time you think about a medical diagnosis, remember, sometimes the most vital elements of healing are the ones human laws and X-ray machines are fundamentally incapable of seeing.